sometimes in life we want to do good things and we have great motivations, and but we look back and see that that maybe we could have done things better, we could have done things differently, that even though we set out with good intentions, maybe in some way we we help to make situations even more complicated than they were at the outset. This is kind of what I think of when I think of the character Kent in King Lear. Kent is one of the few bright spots in the play King Lear, but as I've been thinking about him, I guess he's not as bright in my mind as he was in the past, because Kent clearly wants to do good, and certainly I think we would praise his motivation and his sense of loyalty to King Lear. But I have been thinking about it and wondering if Kent doesn't really make a couple situations more complicated than they otherwise would have been. This quote we see here comes from early in the play. Lear has announced to his family that he wants to retire in peace and he wants to divide his kingdom among his daughters. But before he does this, his daughters need to tell him how much they love him. His first two daughters do this, and they tell him a bunch of lies, and they flatter him, and they get their portions of the kingdom. The third daughter, Cordelia, does not do this. Lear flies into a rage and basically disowns Cordelia. And Kent tries to step in. Kent is Lear's advisor, Lear's servant, and Kent tries to step in and even tells Lear, you're doing evil. So he speaks fairly strongly to King Lear. You're doing evil, Lear. And he wants Lear to take a breath and think about what he's doing, because Cordelia is the daughter who's being truthful. Lear responds and telling Kent, peace, Kent. In other words, be quiet. Shut up. Come not between the dragon and his wrath. In other words, Kent, don't make me angrier than I am. Don't put yourself at risk by coming between me and the anger that I feel as I'm responding to Cordelia's refusal to play this game that I've set up. Lear says of Cordelia, I loved her most. But as we've said in a different discussion, it's hard to believe that's true. If he loved Cordelia, presumably he would have known her, and he would have known that Cordelia could not play the game that he had set up for her. As this scene goes on, Lear's wrath is directed not only at Cordelia but also at Kent, and Kent is banished. Lear says that Kent has a certain number of days to leave England, and if he doesn't do so, then his life will be at risk. Well, as we go, Kent then disguises himself. He's still committed to Lear. Lear is not committed to him, but Kent is committed to Lear, and so Kent will disguise himself, and he'll become Lear's servant again. So Kent finds Lear, and Lear does not recognize Kent because of the disguise, and Lear allows Kent to be his servant. So far, so good. We appreciate Kent's loyalty. Perhaps we might question the loyalty. I mean, does Lear really merit this kind of loyalty? But we can still appreciate Kent's loyalty. Well, as the story goes, Kent comes into contact with Oswald, the servant of Goneril, and Goneril is one of the two daughters who tells Lear these incredible lies about how much they love him in order to get parts of the kingdom. So Kent clearly holds Goneril in contempt. She holds Goneril's servant Oswald in contempt, and when they meet, they have a bit of a confrontation, and the confrontation really is really is triggered by Kent. Oswald, other than, his connection to Goneril sort of setting Kent off, Oswald does not, initiate the confrontation. Kent does. He's very dismissive, very disdainful of Oswald. And as the conversation goes, Oswald asks Kent, what dost thou know me for? I mean, what do you know about me? You're speaking to me so roughly. What do you know about me? And Kent goes on to deliver a series of put-downs of Oswald, and it's much longer than what we have here, but Kent calls him a knave, he calls him a rascal, he calls him an eater of broken meats. A lot of these things are hard to understand, really, what Kent is saying. He says, he calls him a three-suited, 100-pound, filthy, worsted, stocking knave. I'm not exactly sure what all of that means, but we certainly get the idea that Kent is delivering a series of significant put-downs. He calls him once again a knave and a whoreson. It's kind of, entertaining reading this list of put-downs, and it's interesting to, determine exactly what Kent is trying to say. But it does make the situation more complicated, because what this leads to is Kent being put in stocks. And then when Lear shows up, he wants to know who put his servant in the stocks. And what this does is it just contributes to the spirit of conflict that is already at work in the play. So we already have a context of conflict. And this action of Kent, of course, contributes to the conflict. The response, putting Kent in stocks, contributes to the conflict. Lear's response to his servant being put in stocks contributes to the conflict. The simple point being that, I wonder if we could, pull Kent into a conversation and sort of rerun the tape. If we ask Kent, was this a good idea? We understand why you held Oswald in such low regard, because he was the servant of Goneril, whom you held in low regard, and Goneril is a person who deserves to be held in low regard. So we understand why you held Oswald in low regard. But really, was it a good idea to kind of go off on Oswald? Because that did, after all, just contribute to this culture of conflict that's developing in the play. I'm not sure that this made the situation better. And, of course, it's an important part of the play, but it's an example to us of a case where somebody who may have a good underlying motive nevertheless pursues something in a way that isn't really helpful. And we can observe that kind of thing in our own world. At the end of the play, or near the end of the play, Kent is with Cordelia and Lear. Cordelia and Lear reconcile. Lear says to Cordelia that Cordelia has a reason to hate him. Cordelia says that she has no reason. Kent is there, and Kent is loyal to the end. Lear dies. And right at the end of the play, Kent indicates that he's going to follow his master. He's going to follow Lear into death. In other words, he's going to commit suicide. Kent says, I have a journey shortly to go. My master calls me. I must not say no, indicating to us that Kent is going to commit suicide. Once again, we might appreciate Kent's loyalty to Lear. But as I was thinking about this, I was thinking about what Britain has been through as a result of this tremendous conflict that has developed. There's been war. Families have been ripped to pieces. It seems that Britain is in a position at the end of the play where it needs people of experience, it needs people of goodwill to help manage the state in this post-crisis situation. Kent, I think, as I've indicated, I think maybe makes some mistakes, but no one, I don't think, would question his underlying motivation. We may question his execution. We may question his judgment in a particular moment. But he seems to be a person of goodwill, and certainly he has some experience with being in the context of folks who are managing the state. This is the kind of person that Britain needs right now in this post-crisis situation that Britain finds itself in. Kent, in loyalty to his master, heads off the scene and takes his own life and leaves this world. But does that really help the bigger situation? And so, in my mind, until recently, I've always had very positive thoughts about Kent, only positive thoughts about Kent. I still do have positive thoughts about Kent. I appreciate him. I appreciate his loyalty. But I am questioning these significant decisions that he made. In the one case, a decision that actually contributes to the culture of conflict. In the second case, robs Britain of the opportunity to have him as one of the folks who can guide Britain through this post-crisis situation. I think for us, a thing to reflect on is that sometimes we act on good motives. Sometimes we really want to do good in the world. These motives are laudable in themselves. But of course, as we think about execution, how do I want to go about doing good in the world? That also is really important. And maybe the critique that we would make of Kent is that as he was acting on a fundamentally good impulse, that is to be loyal to someone who needed help. Lear needed help, and so it's praiseworthy that Kent did that. But was Kent always really thoughtful about how he did that? That, to me, I think the answer to that is no. And so maybe we could learn something from the example of Kent.